Long before the pyramids pierced the Egyptian sky, or the Greek city-states dreamed of democracy, the story of Persia began on the vast, sun-drenched Iranian plateau, a land sculpted by ancient winds and the whispers of nascent civilizations. Here, in the cradle of what would become a monumental empire, human ingenuity first took root, transforming scattered settlements into vibrant communities. Imagine the quiet hum of life around 7000 BCE, as early inhabitants, perhaps drawn by the fertile lands near the Zagros Mountains, began to cultivate grains and domesticate animals. These were not yet cities of grand design, but rather clusters of mud-brick dwellings, where the rhythm of daily life was dictated by the sun and the seasons, and the collective effort of a few dozen families. As millennia unfolded, a subtle but profound shift occurred. Around 3200 BCE, the humble villages began to coalesce, growing in size and complexity, evolving into the earliest known urban centers on the plateau. One such significant site was Tepe Sialk, near modern-day Kashan, where archaeological digs have revealed layers of continuous habitation, showing a gradual progression from simple agricultural communities to more organized settlements with rudimentary social structures. Here, the first glimmers of shared governance and specialized labor began to appear. Pottery, once a simple necessity, became an art form, adorned with geometric patterns and stylized animal figures, hinting at a burgeoning aesthetic sense and perhaps even early forms of symbolic communication. The air would have carried the scent of wood smoke, baking bread, and the distant bleating of sheep, a symphony of early human endeavor. The landscape itself, with its stark mountains, fertile plains, and arid deserts, played a crucial role in shaping these early societies. The need for water in an often dry climate led to innovative irrigation techniques, fostering cooperation among communities and laying the groundwork for larger-scale organization. Trade routes, initially formed by the movement of nomadic pastoralists, began to solidify, connecting distant settlements and fostering the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies. Obsidian from Anatolia, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and shells from the Persian Gulf found their way across the plateau, testament to the growing interconnectedness of these early peoples. Each piece of traded material carried with it a silent story of journeys taken, risks endured, and the slow, steady expansion of human horizons. By the late 4th millennium BCE, a more distinct cultural identity began to emerge in regions like Elam, situated in the southwest of the plateau, bordering Mesopotamia. Elam, with its capital at Susa, became one of the most prominent early powers, developing its own unique writing system, Proto-Elamite, which remains largely undeciphered by modern scholars. This script, appearing around 3100 BCE, offers a tantalizing glimpse into their administrative practices and economic transactions, though its exact linguistic nature continues to be a subject of scholarly debate. Was it a purely logographic system, or did it contain phonetic elements? Historians still disagree whether Proto-Elamite represents a direct ancestor to later Elamite scripts or a separate experimental development. Regardless, its existence points to a sophisticated society capable of abstract thought and complex record-keeping, far beyond the simple tallying of goods. The Elamites, with their distinctive art and powerful rulers, often found themselves in dynamic interaction, sometimes peaceful, sometimes confrontational, with their Mesopotamian neighbors, particularly the Sumerians and Akkadians. Their ziggurats, though perhaps less famous than those of Mesopotamia, were equally imposing, rising from the plains as testaments to their devotion and power. Their bricks, baked under the same fierce sun that beat down on Ur and Babylon, as the Bronze Age gave way to in the Iron Age, around 1200 BCE, the geopolitical landscape of the Iranian plateau began to shift dramatically. New groups of people speaking Indo-European languages began to migrate into the region. These were the Medes and the Persians, two distinct but related groups who would, in time, leave an indelible mark on history. They arrived not as a single conquering horde, but in waves, settling in different areas of the plateau. The Medes established themselves in the northwestern regions, around Ecbatana, modern Hamadan, while the Persians settled further south in a region that would come to be known as Parsa or Persis, near modern Fars. Their arrival brought new technologies, particularly in metallurgy, and new social structures, characterized by tribal confederations and a strong martial tradition. Imagine the clash of cultures, the gradual intermingling, and the slow absorption of older traditions into these newer ones, like rivers merging and changing course. For centuries, the Medes held sway over their Persian cousins. The Median Empire, though less documented than the later Achaemenid Empire, was a significant power in its own right, acting as a bulwark against the formidable Assyrian Empire to the west. Around 612 BCE, the Medes, in alliance with the Babylonians, played a pivotal role in the final destruction of the Assyrian capital of Nineveh, a city once thought impregnable. This victory marked a turning point, signaling the decline of Assyrian dominance and the rise of new powers in the Near East. The Median kings, like Cyaxares, forged a vast, if somewhat loosely organized, empire that stretched across much of the Iranian plateau and into parts of Anatolia. Their rule, however, was characterized by a decentralized system, with local rulers maintaining significant autonomy, perhaps laying the groundwork for the later Achaemenid model of provincial administration. It was from within this Median sphere of influence that the true dawn of the Persian Empire would emerge. Around 559 BCE, a young man named Cyrus, a prince from the Achaemenid clan of Persis, ascended to the throne of Anshan, a small kingdom within the Median Empire. His lineage traced back to Achaemenes, a semi-legendary figure, and his rise was initially unremarkable. However, Cyrus was a man of extraordinary vision, military genius, and political acumen. He harbored ambitions far beyond the confines of his ancestral lands. The exact circumstances of his rebellion against his Median overlord, Astyages, are shrouded in a mix of historical accounts and legendary embellishments. Some sources suggest a swift military campaign, others a betrayal by Median generals who admired Cyrus's leadership. What is clear is that by 550 BCE, Cyrus had not only defeated Astyages, but had also incorporated the Median Empire into his burgeoning Persian domain, creating a new, unified power. This was not a brutal conquest in the traditional sense. Cyrus often presented himself as a liberator, and his policies towards the conquered Medes were remarkably conciliatory, absorbing their administrative structures and even adopting some of their customs. With the Median Empire secured, Cyrus the Great, as he would come to be known, turned his gaze westward. His conquests were swift and strategic. In 547 BCE, he marched against the wealthy kingdom of Lydia in Anatolia, ruled by the legendary King Croesus. The Lydians, renowned for their vast treasures and their invention of coinage, were a formidable foe. Yet Cyrus's military tactics, which reportedly included the clever use of camels to disorient the Lydian cavalry, proved decisive. Croesus was defeated, and Lydia, with its immense riches, became part of the growing Persian Empire. This victory opened up access to the Aegean Sea, and the Greek city-states of Ionia, bringing Persia into direct contact with the nascent Western world. But Cyrus's most famous and historically significant conquest came in 539 BCE when he turned his attention to Babylon, the magnificent capital of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Babylon, with its towering walls, the legendary hanging gardens, and its powerful king Nabonidus, seemed impregnable. Yet, internal dissent and a clever strategy allowed Cyrus to enter the city with minimal resistance. According to the Cyrus cylinder, a famous clay cylinder inscribed with a cuneiform account of his conquest, Cyrus was welcomed by the populace as a liberator, restoring order and respecting local deities. This act cemented his reputation as a benevolent conqueror, a stark contrast to the brutal Assyrian rulers who had preceded him. The Cyrus cylinder also famously describes his policy of allowing deported peoples, including the Jews, to return to their homelands and rebuild their temples, a policy that has led some scholars to consider him one of the earliest champions of human rights. This pragmatic approach to governance, combining military strength with cultural sensitivity, became a hallmark of the Achaemenid Empire. By the time of his death in 530 BCE, Cyrus had forged an empire of unprecedented scale, stretching from the Aegean Sea in the west to the Indus River in the east, encompassing diverse peoples, cultures, and landscapes. This was the world's first true superpower, a vast tapestry of nations woven together under a single overarching authority. His son, Cambyses II, continued his father's expansionist policies, most notably conquering Egypt in 525 BCE, adding the ancient land of the pharaohs to the Persian domain. This victory not only brought immense wealth and prestige, but also control over vital trade routes and agricultural lands. However, the vastness of the empire also presented significant challenges in terms of administration and control. Darius I, who ascended to the throne in 522 BCE after a period of political turmoil, proved to be a master organizer and administrator. He is often credited with truly solidifying the Achaemenid Empire structure, transforming it from a collection of conquered territories into a cohesive and enduring state. Darius divided the empire into 20 satrapies, or provinces, each governed by a satrap, a loyal Persian official appointed by the king. To prevent these satraps from becoming too powerful, Darius implemented a system of checks and balances, including military commanders independent of the satrap and royal inspectors, often called the king's eyes and ears, who traveled throughout the empire, reporting directly to the king. This sophisticated administrative network ensured central control while allowing for a degree of local autonomy, a remarkable feat for an empire of its size. Darius also standardized coinage, introducing the gold daric and silver siglos, which facilitated trade and economic integration across the vast empire. He initiated ambitious building projects, most famously the magnificent city of Persepolis, designed as a ceremonial capital and a symbol of imperial power and grandeur. The construction of Persepolis, with its towering columns, intricate reliefs, and vast audience halls, was a testament to the empire's wealth and its ability to mobilize resources from across its diverse territories. Imagine the skilled artisans, the sculptors, the architects, and the laborers, drawn from every corner of the empire, working in harmony to create this enduring masterpiece. The Royal Road, another of Darius's monumental achievements, was a vast network of well-maintained roads, complete with roadside inns and relay stations, stretching over 2,500 kilometers from Susa to Sardis. This engineering marvel facilitated rapid communication, troop movements, and trade, binding the disparate parts of the empire together and enabling the efficient flow of information and goods. It was a testament to the Persian commitment to infrastructure, a silent acknowledgement that a strong empire required strong connections. The Achaemenid Empire, under Darius and his successors, fostered an era of unprecedented peace and prosperity, often referred to as the Pax Persica. While there were occasional rebellions and conflicts, particularly with the Greek city-states, the vast majority of the empire experienced relative stability. The Persians were remarkably tolerant of the diverse cultures and religions within their domain, a policy that contributed significantly to their longevity. As long as tribute was paid and order maintained, local customs, languages, and religious practices were generally respected. This policy of cultural pluralism, rather than forced assimilation, was a key factor in the empire's ability to govern such a vast and varied population for over 2 centuries. The Achaemenid kings saw themselves not just as rulers, but as protectors of the cosmic order, chosen by Ahura Mazda, the supreme deity of Zoroastrianism, the religion that gained prominence during this era. Zoroastrianism, with its emphasis on truth, order, and the eternal struggle between good and evil, provided a moral and ethical framework for the empire, influencing its laws and its worldview. The empire's reach was truly global for its time, connecting the civilizations of the Near East, Egypt, Central Asia, and even parts of India. Trade flourished, ideas exchanged, and innovations spread. Persian art, architecture, and administrative practices left an enduring legacy, influencing subsequent empires and cultures for centuries to come. The grand scale of their endeavors, from the vastness of their road networks to the intricate beauty of their palaces, spoke of an empire that understood the power of both might and majesty. The very air of Persepolis, even in ruins, seems to hum with the echoes of ancient ceremonies and the footsteps of kings and ambassadors from every corner of the known world. The Achaemenid Empire was not just a political entity, it was a melting pot of human experience, a testament to the power of organization, vision, and a surprising degree of tolerance in an often brutal ancient world. It was a golden age where the sun truly never set on the Persian dominion, and its influence rippled across continents, shaping the course of human history in ways that are still felt today. If you're enjoying this, liking and subscribing truly helps and is much appreciated. The dust of the battlefield settled, not in silence, but in the murmuring awe of a new dawn. Cyrus, the king of Anshan, had not merely conquered Babylon, he had liberated it. As he rode through the grand Ishtar Gate, its glazed bricks gleaming under the Mesopotamian sun, there was no vengeful destruction, no widespread slaughter. Instead, a sense of order, even reverence, descended. The people who had suffered under the tyrannical rule of Nabonidus greeted him not as a conqueror, but as a restorer. This was the year 539 BCE, and with the fall of Babylon, the Achaemenid Empire, though already formidable, truly began its ascent as a global power. Cyrus was a figure of remarkable foresight and strategic genius. His empire, unlike those before it, was not built solely on brute force, but on a revolutionary concept: tolerance. He understood that a vast realm, stretching across diverse peoples and cultures, could not be held together by fear alone. Instead, he embraced a policy of respecting local customs, religions, and administrative structures. The famous Cyrus cylinder, a small clay barrel inscribed with cuneiform script, proclaims his benevolent policies, detailing how he returned cult statues to their shrines and allowed deported peoples, including the Jews, to return to their homelands. This was an unprecedented act in the ancient world, a radical departure from the Assyrian and Babylonian traditions of forced displacement and cultural eradication. Imagine the collective sigh of relief, the slow blossoming of hope among those who had lived under the shadow of oppression. Perhaps the very stones of Babylon, once echoing with the laments of exiles, now absorbed the quiet joy of their return. Cyrus's reign laid the foundational principles for what would become the Achaemenid Golden Age. He expanded his dominion westward into Anatolia, incorporating the wealthy Lydian kingdom, and eastward into Central Asia, securing the empire's vast borders. His administrative brilliance was evident in the way he integrated these diverse regions, allowing local rulers to maintain some autonomy as long as they pledged loyalty and paid tribute. This decentralized approach fostered stability and loyalty rather than rebellion. Yet, the exact circumstances of Cyrus's death remain shrouded in a mist of legend. Herodotus, the Greek historian, claims he fell in battle against the Massagetae, a nomadic tribe, while other accounts suggest a more peaceful passing. Historians still debate the precise details, but what is undeniable is the immense legacy he left behind. An empire of unprecedented scale, built on principles of respect and order. After a brief period of succession struggles following Cyrus's son Cambyses II's reign, who famously conquered Egypt, the empire found its next great architect in Darius I. Darius, a distant cousin of Cyrus, ascended to the throne in 522 BCE amidst widespread revolts. It was a turbulent time, with various satrapies, the administrative provinces of the empire, attempting to break free. Darius, however, proved to be an exceptional leader, suppressing these rebellions with remarkable efficiency and re-establishing central authority. His reign, spanning from 522 to 486 BCE, marked the true zenith of Achaemenid power and administrative sophistication. Darius was a master organizer. He divided the vast empire into approximately 20 satrapies, each governed by a satrap or provincial governor appointed by the king. To prevent these powerful officials from becoming too independent, Darius implemented a sophisticated system of checks and balances. Alongside the satrap, a military commander and a royal secretary were also appointed, each reporting directly to the king. Furthermore, royal inspectors, known as the king's eyes and ears, traveled throughout the empire, ensuring loyalty and good governance. This intricate administrative web allowed for efficient control over an empire that stretched from the Aegean Sea in the west to the Indus River in the east, encompassing a staggering 44% of the world's population at the time. Imagine the sheer logistical challenge of governing such a vast and diverse realm. Yet Darius made it function with remarkable precision. Beyond administration, Darius revolutionized the empire's infrastructure. He introduced a standardized coinage system, the gold daric and silver siglos, which facilitated trade and economic integration across the empire. He also initiated the construction of the Royal Road, an astonishing network of paved highways stretching over 2,500 kilometers from Susa, one of the empire's capitals, to Sardis in Anatolia. Along this road, royal couriers could travel with incredible speed, relaying messages across the empire in a matter of days, thanks to a system of relay stations and fresh horses. This ancient superhighway was a testament to Persian engineering prowess and a vital artery for communication and commerce. Imagine the rhythmic thud of hooves on the ancient paving stones, carrying vital intelligence or royal decrees across vast distances, connecting disparate corners of the world. But perhaps Darius's most enduring legacy lies in his monumental architectural projects. He initiated the construction of Persepolis, the ceremonial capital. a city carved into the foothills of the Zagros Mountains. This wasn't merely a city. It was a grand statement of imperial power and cultural diversity. The Apadana, the great audience hall, with its towering columns and magnificent staircases, depicted reliefs of delegations from all corners of the empire, bringing tribute to the king. Here, Medes and Elamites, Babylonians and Egyptians, Indians and Scythians, all marched in solemn procession, their distinct ethnic attire meticulously rendered. This visual narrative served as a constant reminder of the empire's vastness and the harmonious integration of its many peoples. The very stones of Persepolis seemed to hum with the echoes of ancient ceremonies, the rustle of rich fabrics, and the murmur of countless languages. Darius also expanded the palace complex at Susa and constructed the Suez Canal, connecting the Nile River to the Red Sea, a remarkable feat of engineering that predates the modern canal by millennia. This canal, though no longer visible, facilitated trade between Egypt and Persia, opening up new maritime routes. The sheer scale and ambition of these projects speak volumes about the wealth and organizational capacity of the Achaemenid Empire under Darius. However, Darius's reign was not without its challenges. The Ionian Greeks, living on the western fringes of the empire, rebelled against Persian rule, seeking assistance from their mainland Greek counterparts. This sparked the Greco-Persian Wars, a series of conflicts that would define the relationship between East and West for centuries. Though Darius launched an expedition against Greece, it culminated in the famous Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE, where the Athenian forces, despite being heavily outnumbered, managed to defeat the Persians. This was a surprising setback for the seemingly invincible Persian Empire, a moment where the tide of history briefly turned against the mighty. Upon Darius's death in 486 BCE, his son Xerxes I ascended to the throne. Xerxes, known in Greek sources for his immense pride and ambition, inherited the ongoing conflict with Greece. He spent years meticulously planning a colossal invasion, gathering an army and navy of unprecedented size. Herodotus claims the Persian army numbered in the millions, a figure likely exaggerated, but undoubtedly it was the largest military force assembled up to that point in history. Xerxes' ambition was to avenge the defeat at Marathon and firmly establish Persian dominance over the troublesome Greek city-states. The invasion began in 480 BCE, with the Persian forces crossing the Hellespont on a bridge of boats, a marvel of ancient engineering. The initial engagements were fierce. The Battle of Thermopylae, where a small force of Spartan and other Greek hoplites bravely held a narrow pass against the overwhelming Persian army for several days, became a legendary tale of defiance and sacrifice. Though the Spartans were eventually annihilated, their stand bought precious time for the rest of Greece to prepare. Imagine the clash of bronze and steel echoing through that narrow pass, the desperate courage against an unstoppable tide. Following Thermopylae, the Persians marched on Athens, which had been evacuated, and burned the Acropolis. This act of destruction, though militarily insignificant, fueled Greek resolve. The decisive naval battle came at Salamis, where the smaller, more maneuverable Greek fleet, led by the Athenian general Themistocles, lured the massive Persian navy into the narrow straits and inflicted a crushing defeat. This was a turning point. Xerxes, witnessing the disaster from a golden throne on a nearby hillside, realized the futility of continuing the campaign himself and returned to Persia, leaving his general Mardonius to continue the fight. The following year, in 479 BCE, the remaining Persian forces were decisively defeated at the Battle of Plataea, effectively ending the Second Persian invasion of Greece. While the Achaemenid Empire remained vast and powerful for another century and a half. The defeats in Greece marked a psychological blow and demonstrated that even the mightiest empire could be challenged. Historians still ponder the long-term impact of these wars. Did they truly save Western civilization, as some argue, or were they merely a series of border skirmishes that, in the grand scheme of the Achaemenid Empire, were relatively minor? The truth likely lies somewhere in between. But the narrative of Greek resistance against Persian might became a foundational myth for Western identity. Despite the Greek setbacks, the Achaemenid Empire continued to flourish for many decades after Xerxes. His successors, Artaxerxes I, Darius II, and Artaxerxes II, maintained the vast administrative machinery established by Darius the Great. The empire remained a beacon of stability and prosperity, a melting pot of cultures and ideas. Persian art and architecture continued to evolve, blending influences from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Greece, creating a unique and magnificent style. The wealth flowing into the imperial coffers from tribute and trade allowed for grand court life, with elaborate ceremonies and vast royal gardens, known as paradisa, from which our word paradise derives. These enclosed gardens, meticulously planned and watered, were earthly reflections of a cosmic order, places of beauty and tranquility amidst the vastness of the empire. Perhaps the gentle rustle of leaves in these ancient gardens still whispers tales of the kings who walked there, contemplating their immense domain. The Achaemenid Golden Age was not just about military might or territorial expansion. It was about the creation of a truly global empire, one that fostered cultural exchange and administrative innovation. It was an empire that, for a time, managed to unite a significant portion of the known world under a single, relatively tolerant rule. From the enlightened policies of Cyrus to the administrative genius of Darius and the grand ambitions of Xerxes, the Achaemenids left an indelible mark on history, shaping the geopolitical landscape for centuries to come. Their legacy was one of order, infrastructure, and a surprising degree of cultural pluralism. A testament to the vision of kings who understood that true power lay not just in conquest, but in the art of governance. The grand tapestry of Achaemenid power, woven over 2 centuries, now faced a thread of an entirely different weave, one spun in the distant lands of Macedon. Far to the west, a young king, tutored by Aristotle himself, was forging an army unlike any seen before. Alexander, driven by ambition and perhaps a youthful vision of a unified world, cast his gaze eastward. The vastness of the Persian Empire, once its greatest strength, now presented a sprawling target. The first tremors of this coming storm were felt at the Granicus River in 334 BCE. Darius III, the last great king of the Achaemenids, underestimated the speed and ferocity of Alexander's phalanx, a bristling wall of spears that moved with terrifying precision. Though the Persian cavalry fought bravely, their decentralized command and reliance on traditional tactics proved insufficient against Alexander's innovative combined arms approach. The riverbanks ran red, not with the blood of an empire, but with the first drops of its waning strength. 2 years later, the decisive clash came at Issus in 333 BCE. Here, Darius himself led a massive army, arrayed in a narrow coastal plain that ironically negated their numerical superiority. Alexander, with his smaller, more disciplined force, exploited this terrain, driving directly towards Darius's position. The great king, witnessing the collapse of his lines and the imminent threat to his own life, fled the field. This retreat, though perhaps a pragmatic decision for survival, shattered the morale of his troops and deeply wounded the prestige of the Achaemenid throne. The image of the invincible great king, the shadow of God on earth, was irrevocably tarnished. The heart of Persia, Persepolis, awaited its fate. After a final, desperate stand at Gaugamela in 331 BCE, where Darius again fled, the path to the ceremonial capital lay open. Alexander entered Persepolis not as a liberator, but as a conqueror. The magnificent palaces, built with the tribute of nations and adorned with the finest artistry, were plundered. Then, in an act that still sparks historical debate, Persepolis was set ablaze. Was it a deliberate act of vengeance for the Persian destruction of Athens during the Greco-Persian Wars, a symbolic end to the Achaemenid era? Or perhaps, as some ancient accounts suggest, the impulsive act of a drunken Alexander, urged on by a courtesan? The truth remains shrouded in the ashes of that fateful night. But the burning of Persepolis marked the definitive end of an empire that had shaped the ancient world for centuries. The smoke rising from its ruins carried away the last vestiges of Achaemenid glory. With Darius III's assassination by his own satrap, Bessus, in 330 BCE, the Achaemenid line officially ceased to exist. Alexander, now master of the known world, sought to integrate, rather than merely subjugate, his vast new territories. He adopted some Persian customs, wore Persian dress, and even encouraged his generals to marry Persian noblewomen in a grand ceremony at Susa, known as the Susa weddings, in 324 BCE. This policy of fusion, however, was met with mixed reactions from his Macedonian veterans, who often viewed their new subjects with disdain. Alexander's sudden death in Babylon in 323 BCE, at the age of 32, plunged his nascent empire into chaos. There was no clear successor, and his generals, the Diadochi, or successors, immediately began to carve up his vast domains. The dream of a unified Hellenic Persian empire dissolved into a brutal struggle for power. Out of this tumultuous period emerged the Seleucid Empire, founded by Seleucus I Nicator. Seleucus, one of Alexander's most capable generals, consolidated his control over Mesopotamia, Syria, Anatolia, and eventually much of the former Achaemenid heartland, including Persia itself. For nearly 2.5 centuries, the Seleucids, though Macedonian in origin, ruled over a predominantly Persian populace. Their capital, Antioch, far to the west, in Syria, reflected their Hellenistic orientation. They established Greek cities throughout their territories, promoting Greek language, culture, and institutions. This period, known as the Hellenistic Age, saw a fascinating blend of Greek and Persian influences. Greek architectural styles appeared alongside traditional Persian forms, and the Zoroastrian faith, though not suppressed, coexisted with Greek polytheism. However, the Seleucid Empire, though vast, was perpetually plagued by internal strife and external pressures. Its sheer size made it difficult to govern effectively, and the constant wars with other Diadochi kingdoms, particularly the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt, drained its resources. Furthermore, the Seleucid rulers, often distant and preoccupied with their western frontiers, struggled to maintain firm control over their eastern provinces. This weakness provided fertile ground for new powers to emerge. One such power began to coalesce in the northeastern Iranian plateau, in a region known as Parthia, east of the Caspian Sea. Here, a nomadic Scythian tribe, the Parni, began to assert their independence from Seleucid rule. Their leader, Arsaces I, declared himself king around 247 BCE, establishing the Arsacid dynasty. This moment, often overlooked in the grand narratives of Rome and Greece, marked the birth of an empire that would become Rome's most enduring and formidable rival in the East. The Parthians, initially a small kingdom, adopted and adapted elements of both Persian and Hellenistic culture. They saw themselves as the true successors to the Achaemenids, even though their origins were nomadic. They revived many Achaemenid traditions, including the title King of Kings, and embraced Zoroastrianism as their state religion. Though they were generally tolerant of other faiths, their capital eventually moved to Ctesiphon on the Tigris River, strategically located near the former Achaemenid capital of Seleucia. What truly set the Parthians apart was their military prowess, particularly their mastery of mounted archery. The Parthian shot, a tactic where horse archers would feign retreat, then turn in the saddle to unleash a volley of arrows at their pursuing enemy, became legendary and devastatingly effective. Their heavy cataphracts, armored cavalry whose horses were also armored, provided a crushing shock force. This combination of speed, precision, and overwhelming power made them a formidable fighting machine, perfectly suited to the vast plains of Iran and Mesopotamia. The Seleucid grip on their eastern territories slowly but inexorably weakened. Mithridates I, who reigned from around 171 to 138 BCE, was a pivotal figure in the Parthian expansion. He systematically conquered Media, Persia proper, Fars, and Mesopotamia, effectively pushing the Seleucids out of the Iranian plateau. His conquests transformed the Parthian kingdom into a true empire, stretching from the Euphrates to the Indus. He even captured the Seleucid capital of Seleucia on the Tigris, a symbolic victory that cemented Parthian dominance in the region. The Parthian Empire, now a major power, soon found itself on a collision course with the rising star of the West, Rome. The two empires, separated by the buffer state of Armenia and the vast Syrian desert, inevitably clashed over control of Mesopotamia and the lucrative Silk Road trade routes. The first major confrontation occurred in 53 BCE at the Battle of Carrhae. Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of the triumvirs who ruled Rome, led a massive Roman army, confident in his legion's invincibility. However, the Parthian general Surena, with his superior knowledge of the terrain and his brilliant use of horse archers and cataphracts, utterly annihilated Crassus's forces. Crassus himself was killed, and the Roman standards, symbols of their honor, were captured, a humiliation that Rome would never forget. This battle was a stark reminder that the East was not easily conquered and that Rome had met it. Match in the Parthian cavalry. The rivalry between Rome and Parthia would define the next 2 centuries. There were numerous campaigns, alternating between Roman invasions into Mesopotamia and Parthian counteroffensives. Roman emperors like Trajan and Septimius Severus launched successful expeditions, even capturing Ctesiphon multiple times, yet they could never hold the territory permanently. The Parthians, with their decentralized feudal system and ability to melt away into the vastness of their empire, proved incredibly resilient. They were a hydra, always regrowing heads, never truly vanquished. One of the lesser-known aspects of Parthian rule is their unique system of governance. Unlike the centralized Achaemenid or Roman empires, the Parthian Empire was a loose confederation of semi-autonomous kingdoms and satrapies, ruled by powerful noble families, often related to the Arsacid royal house. The King of Kings held ultimate authority, but local rulers enjoyed significant autonomy, provided they paid tribute and supplied troops when needed. This decentralized structure, while sometimes leading to internal power struggles, also made the empire incredibly flexible and difficult to conquer. It allowed for rapid mobilization of forces when threatened, as local lords would rally their own contingents, and for a degree of cultural diversity to flourish. Historians still debate the true nature of Parthian culture and its legacy. Was it merely a continuation of Hellenistic traditions? Or did it represent a resurgence of purely Iranian identity after centuries of foreign rule? The truth likely lies somewhere in between. Parthian art and architecture show a fascinating blend of Greek and Iranian elements. While Greek remained an administrative language for a time, Aramaic and then Middle Persian gained prominence. Zoroastrianism, though not enforced with the same rigor as in later Sasanian times, was the dominant religion, and the Parthian kings often made offerings at fire temples. This period saw the development of a distinct Parthian style, characterized by frontal depictions of figures in art, and the iconic Parthian archer on their coinage. The Parthian Empire, despite its resilience, was not without its internal weaknesses. The very decentralized nature that made it difficult to conquer also led to frequent civil wars and succession disputes among the Arsacid princes. These internal conflicts, combined with external pressures from Rome in the west and nomadic incursions from the east, gradually weakened the empire from within. The last century of Parthian rule saw a decline in central authority, with powerful regional families gaining increasing influence. Yet for over 4 centuries, the Parthian Empire stood as a bulwark against Roman expansion into the east, preserving a distinct Iranian identity and culture in the face of powerful Hellenistic and Roman influences. They were not merely a transient power, but a vital link in the long chain of Persian history, bridging the gap between the Achaemenid glory and the coming splendor of the Sasanian era. Their mounted warriors, their unique blend of cultures, and their enduring rivalry with Rome etched their name firmly into the annals of ancient history, a testament to the enduring spirit of the Iranian plateau. The stage was now set for the next great Persian empire to rise from the ashes of the Parthian decline, ready to reclaim the mantle of the King of Kings with renewed vigor and a distinct vision of Iranian glory. As the Parthian star began its slow descent, a new power stirred within the ancient lands of Persia, one that would rekindle the fires of empire with an intensity not seen since the Achaemenid glory days. From the province of Persis, the very heartland of the Achaemenids, arose Ardashir I, a local ruler with a burning ambition and a lineage tracing back to legendary kings. He was not content to merely govern a small domain. He envisioned a unified Persia, reborn and resplendent. In 224 CE, at the Battle of Hormozdagan, Ardashir decisively defeated Artabanus IV, the last Parthian king, marking not just a change of dynasty, but a profound shift in the very character of the Persian Empire. This was the dawn of the Sasanian Empire, an era that would define Persia for over 4 centuries, shaping its art, religion, and its enduring rivalry with the West. The Sasanians, unlike their Parthian predecessors, were fervent centralizers. They sought to establish a strong, unified state built on a foundation of Zoroastrianism, which they elevated to the status of a state religion. This wasn't merely a spiritual preference, it was a politivy tool, a means to forge a common identity and loyalty across their vast territories. The Zoroastrian clergy, the Magi, gained immense influence, their fire temples becoming symbols of imperial authority and spiritual purity. Under their guidance, the Avesta, the sacred texts of Zoroastrianism, was meticulously compiled and canonized, ensuring the preservation of their ancient faith for generations to come. This religious fervor permeated all aspects of Sasanian life, from the intricate carvings on their rock reliefs depicting kings receiving divine blessings, to the very structure of their administration, which often saw religious officials working hand in hand with secular governors. The Sasanian kings, known as Shahanshahs, or King of Kings, inherited a complex geopolitical landscape. To their west lay the Roman Empire, now the Byzantine Empire, after the division of East and West, an eternal rival with whom Persia shared a long, bloody border and an even longer history of conflict. To their east, new nomadic threats emerged from Central Asia, requiring constant vigilance. Yet it was the rivalry with Byzantium that truly defined the Sasanian era. These were not mere border skirmishes. They were grand, epic clashes of two superpowers, each vying for dominance, each believing themselves to be the rightful inheritor of ancient imperial legacies. The Mesopotamian plains became a constant battlefield, with cities like Nisibis, Edessa, and Antioch changing hands multiple times, their walls scarred by siege engines and their streets echoing with the cries of warring armies. One of the most iconic figures of the early Sasanian period was Shapur I, Ardashir's son, who reigned from 240 to 270 CE. Shapur was not just a formidable warrior, but also a shrewd administrator and a patron of the arts and sciences. His military campaigns against the Romans were legendary. In 260 CE, he achieved what no Persian king had done before. He captured a Roman emperor, Valerian, at the Battle of Edessa. This was an unprecedented humiliation for Rome and a moment of immense triumph for Persia, immortalized in the magnificent rock reliefs at Nakshi Rustam, where Shapur is depicted on horseback, with Valerian kneeling before him in submission. This victory solidified Sasanian prestige and demonstrated their military might to the world. Beyond military prowess, Shapur also fostered intellectual life, welcoming scholars from diverse backgrounds, including Greeks and Indians, to his court. The city of Gundeshapur, founded by Shapur I, would later become a renowned center of learning, particularly in medicine, attracting scholars and physicians from across the known world, long before the rise of Baghdad. The Sasanian Empire was a vibrant tapestry of cultures and peoples. While Zoroastrianism was the state religion, other faiths, including Christianity, Judaism, and Manichaeism, also flourished within its borders, though their fortunes often depended on the whims of the reigning Shahanshah. Manichaeism, a syncretic religion founded by the prophet Mani, which blended elements of Zoroastrianism, Christianity, and Buddhism, gained significant traction in the early Sasanian period, even briefly enjoying royal patronage before being brutally suppressed due to its perceived threat to Zoroastrian orthodoxy. This suppression, though harsh, highlights the Sasanian state's determination to maintain religious and ideological unity, a stark contrast to the more decentralized religious policies of the preceding Parthians. The Sasanian economy was robust, fueled by agriculture, particularly in the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, and by extensive trade networks that stretched from China to the Mediterranean. They controlled key segments of the Silk Road, facilitating the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies between East and West. Persian carpets, silks, and exquisite metalwork were highly prized commodities across the ancient world. The Sasanian administrative system was highly organized, with a complex bureaucracy, a sophisticated tax collection system, and a standing army that was a professional fighting force, distinct from the feudal levies of earlier empires. This administrative efficiency allowed them to project power and manage their vast territories effectively. The artistic and architectural achievements of the Sasanians were equally impressive. Their architecture, characterized by grand iwans, vaulted halls open on one side, monumental arches, and intricate stucco decorations, influenced later Islamic architecture. The palace at Ctesiphon, with its colossal Tak-e-Kisra, or Arch of Ctesiphon, remains a breathtaking testament to Sasanian engineering and aesthetic ambition. Their metalwork, particularly silver and gold plates and bowls depicting hunting scenes, mythical creatures, and royal portraits, are masterpieces of ancient art, showcasing a refined aesthetic and sophisticated craftsmanship. These artifacts were not merely decorative. They were expressions of Sasanian power, wealth, and cultural identity, often used as diplomatic gifts or symbols of status. The 5th and 6th centuries CE saw a period of intense struggle and intermittent peace between the Sasanians and Byzantines. The reign of Qavad I, 488 to 531 CE, was marked by significant internal reforms and renewed conflict with Byzantium. Qavad, facing internal strife and external threats from the Hephthalites, White Huns, in the east, implemented a series of radical reforms, including a land tax reform that aimed to centralize control and increase state revenue. He also briefly embraced the Mazdakite movement, a social and religious movement advocating for communal property and social equality, which challenged the established order and the power of the nobility and clergy. This flirtation with Mazdakism, though ultimately suppressed, reveals a fascinating, lesser-known aspect of Sasanian social dynamics and the willingness of some kings to challenge traditional power structures. Historians still debate the true extent of Qavad's personal belief in Mazdakism versus his pragmatic use of the movement to curb the power of the powerful Sasanian nobility and clergy, who had grown increasingly influential. The zenith of Sasanian power and cultural brilliance is often associated with the reign of Khosrow I Anushirvan, the immortal soul, 531 to 579 CE. Khosrow was a true philosopher king, a patron of philosophy, science, and the arts, and a formidable military commander. He reformed the Sasanian army, creating a more professional and meritocratic force, and further centralized the administration. His court at Ctesiphon became a renowned intellectual hub, attracting scholars from across the world, including Neoplatonist philosophers who had fled the closure of the academy in Athens by the Byzants. Achaemenid Emperor Justinian, Khosrow commissioned the translation of numerous Greek and Indian texts into Pahlavi, the Sasanian language, enriching Persian knowledge in fields such as medicine, astronomy, and philosophy. It was during his reign that the famous collection of fables, Kalila wa Dimna, originally from India, was translated into Pahlavi, later influencing Arabic and European literature. Khosrow's pursuit of knowledge and his patronage of intellectual life transformed the Sasanian court into a beacon of learning, often surpassing contemporary European centers in its scholarly breadth. Khosrow I's reign also saw renewed and often devastating wars with the Byzantine Empire, particularly with Emperor Justinian I. These wars, though costly, demonstrated the Sasanian Empire's immense strength and resilience. The Sasanians successfully defended their borders, even capturing the important Byzantine city of Antioch in 540 CE, a major blow to Byzantine prestige. The peace treaties that followed often involved substantial tribute payments from Byzantium to Persia, a testament to Sasanian military superiority at the time. Yet, these endless wars, while showcasing Sasanian power, also began to drain both empires of their resources, laying the groundwork for future vulnerabilities. The Sasanian Empire, at its height, was a sophisticated and powerful state, a true rival to Byzantium. Its influence extended far beyond its political borders, shaping the art, architecture, and administrative practices of regions from Central Asia to the Arabian Peninsula. The Sasanian concept of kingship, their administrative structures, and their artistic motifs would profoundly impact the nascent Islamic caliphate that would eventually succeed them. The very idea of an organized, centralized state with a strong bureaucracy and a professional army, so characteristic of the early Islamic empires, owed much to Sasanian precedents. However, the late Sasanian period was marked by increasing internal strife and devastating external wars. The reign of Khusro II Parviz, 590 to 628 CE, often called the Victorious, initially saw a resurgence of Sasanian power. Khusro II launched an ambitious campaign against Byzantium, aiming to restore the ancient Achaemenid borders. For a time, he was spectacularly successful, conquering vast territories including Egypt, the Levant, and Anatolia, bringing the Sasanian Empire to its greatest territorial extent since the Achaemenids. The True Cross, a revered relic, was even captured from Jerusalem and brought to Ctesiphon, a symbolic victory of immense proportions. Perhaps these walls of Ctesiphon whispered stories of an empire at its very pinnacle, believing its glory would last forever. But this overextension proved unsustainable. The Byzantine Empire, under the brilliant leadership of Emperor Heraclius, launched a daring counteroffensive. Heraclius, using innovative military strategies, struck deep into Persian territory, bypassing Sasanian fortifications and directly threatening the heartland. The final, decisive Battle of Nineveh in 627 CE was a crushing defeat for the Sasanians, effectively ending their ability to wage offensive war. Khusro II, facing mounting defeats and internal discontent, was overthrown and executed by his own son, Kavad II. This marked the beginning of a period of rapid decline, characterized by a succession of weak rulers, civil wars, and economic instability. The endless wars with Byzantium had exhausted both empires, leaving them vulnerable and drained. The Sasanian Empire, though weakened, still possessed formidable resources and a deep-rooted imperial tradition. However, its internal divisions and the sheer exhaustion from centuries of warfare left it ill-prepared for the unprecedented challenge that would emerge from the Arabian Peninsula. The rise of Islam, a new faith with a unifying message and a rapidly expanding military force, would soon sweep across the Middle East, challenging the very foundations of the Sasanian state. The stage was set for a dramatic and irreversible transformation, not just for Persia, but for the entire world. The Sasanian legacy, however, would endure, woven into the fabric of the succeeding Islamic empires. Its administrative practices, artistic styles, and intellectual traditions continuing to shape the world long after its own sun had set. The desert winds, for centuries, had carried the whispers of empires, but none had swept across the ancient lands with such sudden, transformative force as the one that now gathered on the Arabian Peninsula. While the Sasanian Empire, in the early 7th century, still shimmered with its ancient glory, its foundations were subtly weakened by prolonged wars with Byzantium, internal strife, and the quiet erosion of its once unassailable military might. The last great war with the Romans, a grueling 26-year conflict that finally ended in 628 CE, had left both empires utterly exhausted, their treasuries depleted, and their border defenses frayed. It was into this vacuum of power, this moment of profound weariness, that a new faith, Islam, burst forth from the deserts of Arabia, propelled by a fervor and unity rarely seen. The first significant clashes between the nascent Islamic armies and the Sasanian Empire occurred in the 630s. The Sasanian forces, though still formidable in their individual units, lacked the coordinated leadership and morale that had once characterized their legions. The Battle of Al-Qadisiyah, fought around 636 CE, stands as a pivotal moment. Imagine the vast, flat plains, the dust rising in great clouds as the Sasanian heavy cavalry, resplendent in their armor, faced the swift, agile Arab horsemen. The Sasanian general, Rostam Farrukhzad, a figure of legendary courage, led his army with determination. But the tide of battle, after several days of fierce fighting, turned decisively against them. The death of Rostam, shrouded in the chaos of the battlefield, sent a ripple of despair through the Sasanian ranks, marking a psychological turning point. The victory at Al-Qadisiyah opened the gates to the heartland of Persia. The Arab armies pressed on, their momentum seemingly unstoppable. Ctesiphon, the magnificent Sasanian capital, a city that had stood for centuries as a beacon of Persian power and culture, fell in 637 CE. The conquerors entered a city of unimaginable wealth, its palaces adorned with treasures accumulated over generations, its libraries filled with ancient knowledge. The famous Sasanian royal carpet, the Spring of Khosrow, a masterpiece of intricate weaving depicting a garden, was among the spoils, its very existence a testament to the empire's refined artistry. Its division and destruction among the victors symbolized the dismantling of an era. Yet even as the physical symbols of Sasanian power were dispersed, the deeper currents of Persian identity began to flow underground, waiting for their moment to re-emerge. The final, crushing blow to the Sasanian Empire came with the Battle of Nahavand in 642 CE. This engagement, often referred to by Arab historians as the Victory of Victories, saw the last organized resistance of the Sasanian imperial army. The young Sasanian emperor, Yezdegerd III, a tragic figure who had ascended to a crumbling throne, fled eastward, a hunted monarch seeking refuge as his once mighty empire dissolved around him. For years, he wandered, attempting to rally support, but his efforts were in vain. He was eventually assassinated in 651 CE in Merv, a lonely end for the last king of a glorious dynasty. With his death, the Sasanian Empire, which had endured for over 4 centuries, officially ceased to exist. Persia was now integrated into the rapidly expanding Islamic Caliphate, a vast new empire stretching from North Africa to Central Asia. The initial period of Arab rule was characterized by significant changes. Arabic became the language of administration and scholarship, and Islam, initially through conversion of convenience or conviction, began its slow, inexorable spread across the land. The Zoroastrian fire temples, once the heart of Persian spiritual life, gradually faded, though Zoroastrian communities continued to exist, particularly in more remote areas, preserving their ancient faith. Taxes, particularly the jizya, a poll tax levied on non-Muslim, incentivized conversion for some, while others embraced the new faith for its message of unity and equality. Yet, despite the political and religious shifts, the ancient Persian spirit proved remarkably resilient. Unlike other conquered lands, where the indigenous cultures were largely supplanted, Persia, while adopting Islam, began a subtle yet profound process of cultural reassertion. This reemergence was not a military one, but a cultural and linguistic renaissance. Often referred to as the Persian Intermezzo or the Iranian Renaissance, it was a testament to the deep roots of Persian identity, its rich literary tradition, and its sophisticated administrative structures. One of the most significant aspects of this revival was the reemergence of the Persian language, Farsi. While Arabic remained the language of religion and high scholarship, Farsi, enriched by Arabic vocabulary, but retaining its distinct grammatical structure, began to flourish once more, particularly in poetry. The 9th and 10th centuries saw the rise of a new generation of Persian poets who, patronized by local Persian dynasties that emerged within the caliphate, began to compose magnificent works in their native tongue. Perhaps the greatest figure of this literary revival was Ferdowsi, who, in the late 10th and early 11th centuries, composed the Shahnameh, or the Book of Kings. This monumental epic poem, consisting of over 60,000 couplets, retells the mythical and historical past of Persia, from the creation of the world to the Arab conquest. It is not merely a collection of stories, but a profound act of cultural preservation, a conscious effort to safeguard the Persian language, its legends, and its sense of national identity, at a time when Arabic dominance was still strong. Imagine Ferdowsi, perhaps working for decades in relative obscurity, meticulously gathering ancient tales and weaving them into a grand narrative, ensuring that the stories of heroes like Rostam and the kings of old would never be forgotten. The Shahnameh became and remains the national epic of Iran, a cornerstone of its cultural heritage. Beyond literature, Persian art and architecture, while incorporating Islamic motifs and styles, retained a distinct Persian flavor. The intricate tilework, the elegant calligraphy, and the sophisticated garden designs that characterize Islamic art in Persia often drew upon pre-Islamic Sasanian traditions. The concept of the Qajar Bagh, the four-part garden, for instance, with its symbolic representation of paradise, has ancient Persian roots that predate Islam. The reemergence of Persian identity was also facilitated by the rise of semi-independent and independent Persian dynasties within the broader Islamic Caliphate. The Tahirids, 821 to 873 CE, the Saffarids, 861 to 1003 CE, and especially the Samanids, 819 to 999 CE in the eastern parts of Persia, played crucial roles in fostering Persian culture and language. The Samanids, in particular, were great patrons of learning and the arts, establishing libraries and encouraging scholars and poets. It was under their patronage that the foundations of classical Persian literature were firmly laid. Historians still debate the precise nature of their relationship with the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad. Were they truly independent or merely highly autonomous governors? Regardless, their existence allowed for a distinct Persian cultural space to flourish. This period also saw the development of a unique Persian Islamic synthesis, where Islamic principles were interpreted and expressed through a Persian lens. Sufism, the mystical branch of Islam, found fertile ground in Persia, producing some of its most profound thinkers and poets, such as Rumi, whose verses, though written in Persian, transcend cultural boundaries with their universal message of love and spiritual longing. The intellectual curiosity of the Persians, inherited from their ancient philosophical traditions, contributed significantly to the Golden Age of Islam, particularly in fields like medicine, mathematics, and astronomy. Scholars like Avicenna, Ibn Sina, a Persian polymath of the 10th and 11th centuries, wrote extensively in Arabic, but his intellectual lineage was deeply rooted in the Persian pursuit of knowledge. The transition from a Sasanian Zoroastrian empire to an Islamic Persia was not a clean break, but a complex, multifaceted process of absorption, adaptation, and reinvention. The physical landscape transformed, with mosques rising where fire temples once stood. But the underlying cultural currents, the ancient stories, the love of poetry, and the artistic sensibilities continued to flow, shaping the new Islamic identity in a distinctly Persian way. Perhaps the stones of Persepolis, now silent and weathered, watched this transformation with a quiet understanding, knowing that while empires rise and fall, the spirit of a people, like a deep river, finds new channels to flow. The resilience of Persian identity, Its ability to absorb new influences while retaining its essence is one of the most remarkable stories in world history, a testament to the enduring power of culture over conquest. This subtle, yet powerful reemergence laid the groundwork for the future of Iran, a nation that would forever carry the echoes of its ancient past within its Islamic present. The sun, having warmed the vast plains and ancient cities of Persia for centuries, now cast longer, more uncertain shadows as the 9th century drew to a close. The grand unified caliphate, once a singular shimmering jewel, had begun to fragment, not with a sudden shattering, but with a gradual, almost imperceptible fissuring. From within this shifting landscape, new powers began to coalesce, each drawing strength from the rich cultural soil of Persia itself. Even as they pledged nominal fealty to distant Baghdad, it was an age where the concept of a singular overarching authority began to yield to a tapestry of independent Persianate dynasties, each weaving its own thread into the enduring fabric of the land. Among the earliest and most vibrant of these emergent powers were the Samanids, whose roots stretched back to the ancient nobility of Balkh, a lineage that spoke of a deep connection to pre-Islamic Persian heritage. By the late 9th century, their influence solidified across Transoxiana and Khorasan, regions that pulsed with the intellectual and artistic life of the age. Their capital, Bukhara, became a beacon of learning, a city where the rustle of parchment rivaled the whisper of the wind through date palms. Under Samanid patronage, the Persian language, which had patiently endured the dominance of Arabic in official spheres, experienced a magnificent renaissance. Poets like Rudaki, often hailed as the father of Persian poetry, found eager ears and generous support, their verses blooming like spring flowers after a long winter. It was here, in the Samanid courts, that the foundations of classical Persian literature were firmly laid, creating a linguistic and cultural legacy that would resonate for 1,000 years. The Samanids, though nominally governors for the Abbasid Caliphate, exercised true sovereignty, minting their own coins, administering their own justice, and fostering a distinct Persian identity that blended seamlessly with Islamic tenets. They were, in essence, the guardians of a burgeoning Persian cultural revival, a golden age that saw advancements in medicine, astronomy, and philosophy flourish alongside the poetic arts. Yet even as the Samanids cultivated this rich intellectual garden, the seeds of their own decline were being sown. Their military strength increasingly relied upon Turkic slave soldiers, known as gulams, who, while formidable warriors, gradually amassed significant power within the state. This reliance created an internal tension, a subtle shift in the balance of power that would ultimately prove destabilizing. From the ranks of these very gulams emerged another formidable force, the Ghaznavids, named after their capital, Ghazni, nestled high in the mountains of what is now Afghanistan. This dynasty was founded by Sebuktigin, a Turkic gulam who rose through the Samanid ranks. By the end of the 10th century, his son, Mahmud of Ghazni, would transform this nascent state into a vast empire, stretching from the Oxus River to the Indian Ocean. Mahmud of Ghazni was a figure of immense ambition and military prowess, a conqueror whose campaigns into the Indian subcontinent became legendary. He launched numerous expeditions, famously sacking the wealthy temple city of Somnath in 1025, an act that secured immense riches for his treasury and cemented his reputation as a formidable Islamic warrior. While his focus was often directed eastward, his dominion over much of Persia was undeniable. Under the Ghaznavids, cities like Nishapur and Ray continued to thrive, even as the center of power shifted slightly south. Mahmud, despite his Turkic origins, embraced Persian culture, adorning his court with poets and scholars, much like his Samanid predecessors. Ferdowsi, the monumental epic poet whose Shahnameh, or Book of Kings, chronicled the mythical and historical past of Persia, completed his colossal work during this period, though his relationship with Mahmud was complex and at times fraught with disappointment. This era, therefore, saw a continuation of the Persian cultural blossoming, even as the political landscape became increasingly dominated by Turkic military might. However, the Ghaznavid Empire, for all its military might and cultural patronage, was not destined for eternal dominance. Its very expansion created vulnerabilities, stretching its resources and leaving its northern and eastern frontiers exposed. It was from these very steppes, a vast, undulating expanse that had for millennia served as a crucible for nomadic peoples, that the next great wave of invaders would emerge, the Seljuk Turks. Unlike the Ghulams, who were integrated into existing military structures, the Seljuks arrived as entire tribes, driven by a combination of internal pressures, the search for new pastures, and the allure of settled lands. They were a branch of the Oghuz Turks, and their leadership, particularly under figures like Togrul Beg, possessed a remarkable blend of military acumen and political shrewdness. The clash between the Ghaznavids and the Seljuks was inevitable. The decisive moment came in 1040 at the Battle of Dandanakan, a pivotal engagement near Merv. The Ghaznavid army, though larger and seemingly better equipped, was outmaneuvered and ultimately defeated by the more agile and disciplined Seljuk cavalry. This battle marked a profound turning point in Persian history. It signaled the end of Ghaznavid dominance in Persia proper and ushered in the era of the Great Seljuk Empire. The Seljuks, unlike previous invaders, did not merely conquer. They established a lasting state, one that would profoundly reshape the political and religious landscape of the Near East. The Seljuk Empire, at its zenith, stretched from Central Asia to Anatolia, encompassing most of Persia, Mesopotamia, and parts of Syria. They embraced Sunni Islam with fervor, becoming powerful champions of the Abbasid Caliphate, which by this point had become largely a symbolic authority. Under the Seljuks, a new administrative structure emerged, characterized by the Iqta system, a form of land grant given in exchange for military service, which, while effective in consolidating power, also laid the groundwork for future decentralization. The Seljuks were not merely conquerors, they were also patrons of learning and architecture. The famed Nizam al-Mulk, the brilliant Persian vizier who served both Alp Arslan and Malik Shah, established the Nizamiya Madrasas, a network of influential Islamic colleges that promoted Sunni orthodoxy and trained future administrators. These institutions, like the one in Nishapur, became centers of intellectual life, fostering scholarship and shaping the religious discourse of the age. It was during this period that figures like Omar Khayyam, the polymath astronomer, mathematician and poet, flourished, his scientific inquiries and philosophical quatrains reflecting the vibrant intellectual atmosphere. However, the very success of the Seljuks also contained the seeds of their fragmentation. The practice of dividing the empire among various Seljuk princes, while intended to maintain family unity, often led to internecine struggles and the rise of semi-independent regional rulers known as Atabegs. By the late 12th century, the Great Seljuk Empire had fractured into several smaller sultanates, each vying for power, leaving Persia a patchwork of competing authorities. This internal disunity, coupled with the constant pressure from various nomadic groups on their borders, created a volatile environment, a land ripe for yet another even more devastating wave of invasion. And so, as the 13th century dawned, a chilling wind began to blow from the east, carrying with it the rumble of countless hooves and the promise of unprecedented destruction. This was the era of the Mongol invasions, an event so cataclysmic that its memory would be etched deep into the collective consciousness of Persia for centuries to come. The Mongols, unified under the charismatic and terrifying leadership of Genghis Khan, had swept across the steppes of Central Asia with astonishing speed and ferocity. Their military tactics, characterized by swift cavalry charges, psychological warfare, and an unwavering commitment to total victory, were unlike anything the settled empires of the West had ever encountered. The initial Mongol incursions into Persia began in the early 1220s, largely in retaliation for the execution of Mongol envoys by the Khwarezmian Shah, a powerful though ultimately fragile empire that had risen to prominence in the wake of Seljuk decline. The Khwarezmian Shah, Ala al-Din Muhammad II, underestimated the Mongol threat, and his empire, despite its vastness, crumbled with shocking rapidity. City after city fell to the Mongol onslaught. Bukhara, Samarkand, Merv, Nishapur. The scale of destruction was immense, almost unimaginable. Accounts from the period speak of entire populations being massacred, cities razed to the ground, and irrigation systems, painstakingly built over centuries, deliberately destroyed. Historians still debate the precise demographic impact of the Mongol invasions on Persia. While some earlier estimates suggested a catastrophic reduction in population by as much as 3/4, more recent scholarship suggests that while the destruction was undeniably severe and localized, the long-term demographic impact might have been less uniform, with some regions recovering more quickly than others. Nevertheless, the immediate devastation was profound, leaving a scar on the land and its people. The second, even more comprehensive, wave of Mongol invasion came in the 1250s, led by Hulagu Khan, a grandson of Genghis Khan. His mission was to consolidate Mongol rule over Persia and to dismantle the remaining pockets of resistance. This campaign culminated in the siege and fall of Baghdad in 1258, an event that symbolically marked the end of the Abbasid Caliphate, an institution that had, for 5 centuries, represented the spiritual and, at times, political heart of the Islamic world. The sack of Baghdad was a moment of immense cultural and intellectual loss, with libraries and academies, repositories of centuries of knowledge, reportedly destroyed. Following these conquests, the Mongols established the Ilkhanate, a Mongol Khanate that ruled over Persia and parts of the surrounding regions for nearly a century. While the initial phase of Mongol rule was characterized by brutality and destruction, the Ilkhans gradually adopted Persian administrative practices and, perhaps most significantly, converted to Islam, largely under the reign of Ghazan Khan in the late 13th century. This conversion marked a crucial turning point, leading to a period of relative stability and even cultural flourishing, albeit under foreign rule. Persian continued to be the language of administration and culture, and the Ilkhans became patrons of art, architecture, and science. The magnificent observatory at Marageh, built under the patronage of Hulagu Khan and directed by the renowned astronomer Nasir al-Din Tusi, stands as a testament to this unexpected intellectual revival. A place where astronomical tables were compiled and scientific discourse continued even amidst the echoes of destruction. The Mongol invasion, while devastating, also inadvertently facilitated new connections. The vast Mongol Empire, stretching across Eurasia, opened up trade routes like the Silk Road to an unprecedented degree, allowing for the exchange of goods, technologies, and ideas between East and West. Chinese influences, particularly in art and ceramics, became visible in Persian works, enriching the already vibrant artistic traditions. Yet, the social and political landscape of Persia was irrevocably altered. The traditional landowning aristocracy was often displaced, and the power of religious institutions, though initially challenged, eventually reasserted itself, often serving as a unifying force in a fractured world. The experience of foreign rule, first under the Seljuks and then the Mongols, deeply ingrained a sense of resilience and adaptability within the Persian identity, a capacity to absorb, transform, and endure. The independent Persianate dynasties had shown the world the enduring strength of Persian culture, even as they wrestled with internal divisions and external threats. The invasions, while tearing at the fabric of society, ultimately reshaped it, leading to new syntheses and new expressions of Persian genius, always waiting for the next dawn to cast its light upon the ancient land. The dust of Mongol and Timurid conquests had finally begun to settle, leaving behind a mosaic of smaller states and fractured loyalties across the Iranian plateau. Yet, from this fragmented landscape, a new power was destined to rise, one that would not only reunify Persia, but also imbue it with a distinct religious identity that endures to this day. This was the dawn of the Safavid Empire, a period of profound transformation, imperial splendor, and the flowering of a uniquely Persian Shi'ism. Our journey now carries us to the late 15th and early 16th centuries, to a spiritual order known as the Safaviya. Founded in the city of Ardabil in Azerbaijan, this Sufi tariqa, or brotherhood, traced its lineage back to Sheikh Safi al-Din Ardabili, a revered mystic from the 13th century. Initially, the Safavids were a Sunni order, but over generations, their teachings gradually shifted, incorporating more and more elements of Twelver Shi'ism, a branch of Islam that believes in a succession of 12 divinely appointed imams after the Prophet Muhammad. This evolution was subtle at first, perhaps driven by a desire to distinguish themselves from the dominant Sunni powers surrounding them, or perhaps a genuine spiritual progression within the order itself. Historians still debate the precise motivations and timing of this pivotal religious shift, wondering if it was a calculated political move or a deeply felt spiritual awakening that propelled the Safavids towards Shi'ism. By the late 15th century, the Safaviya had transformed from a quiet mystical order into a formidable military and political force. Their followers, known as the Qizilbash, or Red Heads, due to their distinctive red headgear, were fierce Turkoman tribesmen from Anatolia and Azerbaijan, deeply devoted to their spiritual leader, whom they saw not merely as a sheikh, but as a divine manifestation, an incarnation of the Imam. This fervent loyalty, bordering on messianic devotion, would prove to be the bedrock of the nascent Safavid state. The man who would harness this devotion and forge an empire was Ismail I. Born in 1487, Ismail was a direct descendant of Sheikh Safi al-Din. Orphaned at a young age and forced into hiding, he emerged from obscurity in 1500. A charismatic and determined leader. At just 13 years old, he rallied the Qizilbash, leading them in a series of lightning campaigns that swept across Persia. His victories were swift and decisive, fueled by the unwavering belief of his followers that they were fighting for a sacred cause, guided by a divinely chosen leader. In 1501, after conquering Tabriz, Ismail declared himself Shah of Persia. This was a moment of immense historical significance, for it marked not only the reunification of Persia after centuries of fragmentation, but also the official establishment of Twelver Shi'ism as the state religion. This was a radical departure from the Sunni orthodoxy that had prevailed in Persia for centuries and set the Safavid Empire apart from its powerful neighbors, the Sunni Ottoman Empire to the west and the Sunni Uzbeks to the east. Ismail immediately set about converting the populace, often through force or strong persuasion, inviting Shi'i scholars from across the Islamic world to establish religious institutions and propagate the new faith. This deliberate imposition of a distinct religious identity was a cornerstone of Safavid rule, shaping Persian culture, law, and national consciousness in profound ways. Under Shah Ismail and his successors, particularly Shah Abbas I, the Safavid Empire reached its zenith, a true golden age of imperial splendor. The capital was eventually moved to Isfahan, a city that would be transformed into one of the most magnificent urban centers in the world. Shah Abbas I, who reigned from 1588 to 1629, is widely regarded as the greatest of the Safavid rulers. He recognized the need to modernize the army, reducing reliance on the sometimes unruly Qizilbash and creating a standing army composed of Georgian, Armenian, and Circassian converts to Islam, equipped with gunpowder weapons. This military reform allowed him to reclaim territories lost to the Ottomans and Uzbeks and secure Persia's borders. But Shah Abbas's vision extended far beyond military might. He was a patron of the arts, a builder, and a visionary urban planner. Isfahan, under his patronage, became a breathtaking showcase of Persian artistry and architecture. The Naqsh Jahan Square, meaning image of the world square, was the heart of this new capital, a vast expanse surrounded by architectural masterpieces. Imagine standing in the center of this square, perhaps in the early 17th century, the air filled with the scent of spices and blooming flowers, the sounds of merchants hawking their wares, and the murmur of prayers from the grand mosques. To one side stood the magnificent Shah Mosque, its towering minarets and shimmering blue-tiled domes reflecting the sunlight, a testament to Safavid religious devotion and architectural prowess. On another side was the exquisite Sheikh Lafala Mosque, smaller and more intimate, renowned for its delicate cream-colored dome that changes color with the light, a masterpiece of subtle beauty. Facing the Shah Mosque was the Ali Kapu Palace, the royal residence, with its elevated terrace offering panoramic views of the square and the city beyond. And connecting the square to the Grand Bazaar was the Qajar Gate, a bustling entryway to a labyrinth of shops and workshops where artisans crafted exquisite carpets, intricate miniatures, and shimmering metalwork. The Safavid era saw an unprecedented flourishing of Persian art forms. Carpet weaving reached new heights of sophistication, with intricate designs and vibrant colors becoming hallmarks of Safavid workshops. Miniature painting, an art form that had been refined over centuries, continued to evolve, producing delicate and detailed illustrations for manuscripts, depicting scenes of court life, epic poems, and mystical narratives. Calligraphy, ceramics, and metalwork also thrived, each piece reflecting the unique aesthetic sensibilities of the time, often incorporating floral motifs, geometric patterns, and verses from the Quran or classical Persian poetry. These artistic endeavors were not merely decorative, they were expressions of a rich cultural identity, deeply intertwined with the Safavid vision of a unified Shi'i Persia. One particularly intriguing aspect of Safavid society was the role of coffee houses. While not unique to Persia, These establishments became vibrant centers of social and intellectual life in Safavid cities, particularly Isfahan. Unlike the more formal settings of the court or religious seminaries, coffee houses offered a relaxed atmosphere where people from different walks of life could gather. Here, poets recited their verses, storytellers captivated audiences with tales from the Shahnameh or local folklore, and scholars engaged in lively debates. It was a space where news was exchanged, rumors spread, and ideas, both secular and religious, were freely discussed, contributing to the dynamic intellectual landscape of the empire. This seemingly minor detail reveals a deeper layer of Safavid urban life, a place where the pulse of the empire could be felt beyond the grand palaces and mosques. The Safavids also established strong diplomatic ties with European powers, primarily driven by a shared desire to counter the Ottoman Empire. Shah Abbas I, in particular, sent envoys to Europe and welcomed European merchants and artisans to his court. These interactions led to a fascinating exchange of ideas, technologies, and goods, with Persian silks and carpets finding their way to European markets, and European firearms and scientific knowledge influencing Safavid military and intellectual circles. This cosmopolitan outlook further enriched the cultural tapestry of the empire. However, despite its splendor and achievements, the Safavid Empire, like all great powers, eventually began to decline. The seeds of its downfall were sown by internal weaknesses and external pressures. After the death of Shah Abbas I, a succession of less capable rulers ascended the throne. The practice of keeping royal princes confined to the harem, away from practical governance and military training, meant that future shahs often lacked the experience and acumen needed to rule effectively. This led to a weakening of central authority, increased corruption, and the rise of powerful, often competing factions within the court. The religious zeal that had initially unified the empire also became a source of rigidity. Later Safavid Shahs, influenced by conservative Shi'i clerics, adopted increasingly intolerant policies towards non-Shi'i minorities, leading to internal unrest and resentment. This contrasted sharply with the more pragmatic and tolerant approach of earlier Safavid rulers like Shah Abbas, who understood the importance of maintaining stability among diverse populations. Economically, the empire faced challenges from declining trade routes and a lack of innovation. The vibrant trade that had flowed through Persia began to shift, and the Safavid state, heavily reliant on land-based trade and agricultural revenues, struggled to adapt. External threats also intensified. The Ottoman Empire remained a formidable rival, engaging in intermittent wars that drained Safavid resources. To the east, the Uzbeks continued to pose a threat, and new powers, such as the Afghan Hotaks, began to emerge, sensing the Safavid weakness. The end of the Safavid Empire came in 1722, when an army of Afghan Hotaks, led by Mahmud Hotak, marched on Isfahan. The siege of the capital was long and brutal. Marked by starvation and disease, the once magnificent city, a symbol of Safavid power and glory, fell. Shah Sultan Hussein, the last effective Safavid ruler, abdicated, bringing an end to over 2 centuries of Safavid rule. While a nominal Safavid claimant was later installed by Nader Shah Afshar, the true power of the dynasty had vanished. The fall of Isfahan was a traumatic event for Persia, plunging the country into a period of chaos and fragmentation. Yet, the legacy of the Safavids endured. They had fundamentally reshaped Persia's identity, firmly establishing Twelver Shi'ism as the national religion, a cornerstone that continues to define Iran today. They had reunified the Persian lands, creating a strong, centralized state that laid the groundwork for future Persian empires. And they had presided over a cultural and artistic renaissance that produced some of the most exquisite works of art and architecture in Persian history. The blue domes of Isfahan, still shimmering under the sun, whisper stories of a golden age, a time when Persia, under the Safavid banner, once again shone brightly on the world stage, forging an identity that would withstand the trials of centuries to come. The echoes of their grand vision, their spiritual fervor, and their artistic brilliance still resonate across the Iranian plateau, a testament to an empire that not only ruled, but also profoundly transformed the soul of a nation. The whispers of a fading empire often precede the roar of a new conqueror, and so it was in Persia as the Safavid star dimmed. The early 18th century found the realm fractured, its once unifying Shiite faith now a source of internal strife, its borders porous to ambitious neighbors. From the east, Afghan incursions, culminating in the siege of Isfahan in 1722, brought the Safavid dynasty to its knees, plunging Persia into a period of chaos and foreign occupation. The capital, once a jewel of Safavid artistry, lay devastated, its gardens scorched, its palaces plundered. It was into this crucible of disorder that a figure of formidable will and military genius emerged, Nader Qoli Beg, later known as Nader Shah. Born in 1688 into a humble Afshar tribal family in Khorasan, Nader rose through the ranks of local warlords, distinguishing himself first as a bandit, then as a formidable military commander. He possessed an uncanny ability to rally disparate forces, to inspire loyalty, and to execute brilliant tactical maneuvers. His initial goal was the expulsion of the Afghan invaders and the restoration of the Safavid throne, albeit under his own formidable shadow. By 1729, Nader had decisively defeated the Afghans at the Battle of Damghan, a victory that showcased his innovative use of artillery and disciplined cavalry. The Afghans, who had held sway over much of Persia for nearly a decade, were driven out, and the Safavid prince Tahmasp II was nominally restored to the throne. Yet the true power resided with Nader, who by 1736 felt secure enough to depose Tahmasp II and, in a grand assembly on the Mugan plain, proclaim himself Shah of Persia. He sought to forge a new empire, not merely restore an old one, and his ambitions stretched far beyond Persia's traditional borders. Nader Shah's reign, though brief, was marked by an almost ceaseless series of military campaigns that reshaped the geopolitical landscape of Asia. His armies, meticulously trained and equipped, became a terror to his neighbors. He reconquered territories lost to the Ottomans and Russians, asserting Persian dominance over the Caucasus and Mesopotamia. But his most audacious campaign was undoubtedly his invasion of India in 1739. The Mughal Empire, once a colossus, had grown weak and decadent, its vast wealth a tempting prize. Nader's forces swept through the Khyber Pass, overcoming formidable natural barriers and local resistance. The Battle of Karnal saw the Persian army decisively defeat the larger but less disciplined Mughal forces. Nader then marched into Delhi, the Mughal capital, where a massacre ensued after a local uprising. The city was plundered of unimaginable riches, including the legendary Peacock Throne and the Koh-i-Noor diamond, treasures that would forever symbolize the pinnacle of Persian military might under Nader. The wealth brought back from India, however, did not translate into lasting prosperity for Persia. Nader Shah's constant warfare, fueled by an insatiable desire for conquest, drained the country's resources and exhausted its people. His tax demands were crippling, and his methods of extracting revenue increasingly brutal. He abolished the Shiite clergy's land grants, alienating a powerful segment of society, and attempted to promote a more unified, less sectarian form of Islam, perhaps to facilitate better relations with the Sunni Ottoman Empire. This religious policy, however, proved deeply unpopular among his largely Shiite subjects. As his reign progressed, Nader grew increasingly paranoid and cruel, his once brilliant mind clouded by suspicion and fits of rage. He blinded his own son, Reza Koli Mirza, believing him to be plotting against him, an act that plunged him into even deeper despair and tyranny. His relentless campaigns and oppressive rule ultimately led to his assassination in 1747 by a group of his own officers, bringing an abrupt end to his meteoric yet destructive reign. Nader Shah's death plunged Persia into another period of fragmentation and civil war. His vast empire, built on military prowess rather than stable institutions, dissolved almost immediately. Various claimants to power emerged, leading to decades of internecine conflict. Among these, Karim Khan Zand, a chieftain of the Zand tribe, gradually consolidated power over much of Persia, establishing the Zand dynasty. Karim Khan, ruling from 1750 to 1779, chose Shiraz as his capital, transforming it into a city of beauty and culture, adorned with exquisite gardens and elegant buildings. Unlike Nader Shah, Karim Khan eschewed the title of Shah, preferring to be known as Vakil-e-Raya, the regent of the people, reflecting a more benevolent and less autocratic approach to governance. He focused on internal stability, economic recovery, and fostering trade, bringing a much-needed period of peace and relative prosperity to a war-weary land. His reign is often remembered as a golden age of sorts, a brief respite before the next wave of upheaval. He fostered good relations with European powers, particularly the British East India Company, encouraging trade and cultural exchange, though he remained wary of their political ambitions. However, the Zand dynasty, like so many before it, proved to be short-lived. Upon Karim Khan's death in 1779, another power struggle erupted, culminating in the rise of Aga Muhammad Khan Qajar. Aga Muhammad Khan, a eunuch who had been castrated by Nader Shah's nephew as a child, harbored a deep-seated desire for revenge and an unyielding ambition to establish his own dynasty. He systematically eliminated his rivals, displaying a ruthless determination and cunning that shocked even his contemporaries. In 1794, he finally defeated the last Zand claimant, Lotfali Khan, and in 1796, he formally crowned himself Shah, founding the Qajar dynasty, which would rule Persia for over a century. He chose Tehran, a strategically located village, as his new capital, laying the foundations for the sprawling metropolis it is today. His reign, though brief, was marked by the re-establishment of a centralized, albeit brutal, authority over Persia. He was known for his extreme cruelty, often employing torture and mass executions to consolidate his power and quell dissent. His assassination in 1797 by his own servants, weary of his tyranny, brought an end to his reign of terror, but the Qajar dynasty he founded would endure. The Qajar period, spanning from 1785 to 1925, marked a significant shift in Persia's historical trajectory, moving from a regional power to a state increasingly subjected to the pressures of European imperialism. The early Qajar Shahs, such as Fath Ali Shah, ruling from 1797 to 1834, and Muhammad Shah, ruling from 1834 to 1848, inherited a vast but economically weak and technologically backward empire, While they sought to modernize their military and administration, their efforts were often hampered by internal dissent, lack of funds, and the overwhelming technological superiority of the encroaching European powers, particularly Great Britain and Russia. These two great powers, engaged in a geopolitical rivalry known as the Great Game for control over Central Asia and access to India, viewed Persia as a crucial buffer state and a potential sphere of influence. The consequences of this geopolitical struggle were profound for Persia. The Qajars were forced to cede vast territories, including parts of the Caucasus, to Russia through the treaties of Golistan, 1813, and Turkmenchay, 1828, following devastating defeats in the Russo-Persian Wars. These treaties not only resulted in territorial losses, but also granted Russia significant capitulatory rights, allowing their citizens in Persia to be tried under Russian law, undermining Persian sovereignty. Britain, meanwhile, solidified its influence in the east, particularly in Afghanistan and Balochistan, further eroding Persia's traditional sphere of influence. Historians still debate the extent to which the Qajars genuinely resisted these pressures, or were simply too weak and strategically outmaneuvered to do so. Some argue that the Qajars, despite their flaws, tried to play the European powers against each other, a strategy that ultimately proved ineffective against such dominant forces. The Qajar era also saw the slow but steady erosion of Persia's economic independence. European powers secured lucrative concessions for mining, banking, railways, and most significantly, oil. The discovery of oil in Masjed Suleiman in 1908 by William Knox D'Arcy, leading to the formation of the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, later BP, marked a pivotal moment. This vast resource, controlled by foreign interests, became a major source of contention and a symbol of Persia's diminished sovereignty. The economic benefits for Persia were minimal, with the vast majority of profits flowing out of the country. This exploitation, coupled with the Qajar court's perceived corruption and extravagance, fueled growing discontent among the populace. Internally, the Qajar dynasty struggled with modernization, while some Shahs, like Nasir al-Din Shah, reigned from 1848 to 1896, attempted reforms, including establishing modern schools, sending students abroad, and introducing telegraph lines and postal services. These efforts were often piecemeal and lacked sustained commitment. The traditional social structure, dominated by the landed aristocracy and the powerful Shiite clergy, resisted change. The clergy in particular viewed Western influence as a threat to Islamic values and their own authority, often mobilizing popular resistance against government reforms or foreign concessions. One lesser-known example of this resistance was the tobacco protest of 1891, when Nasir al-Din Shah granted a monopoly on the production, sale, and export of tobacco to a British company. A nationwide boycott, led by prominent clerics and merchants, paralyzed the economy and forced the Shah to cancel the concession, demonstrating the significant power of popular and clerical opposition. The late Qajar period was characterized by increasing political instability and a burgeoning constitutional movement. Intellectuals and merchants, inspired by Western ideas of democracy and justice, grew increasingly frustrated with the autocratic rule and foreign subservience of the Shahs. The assassination of Nasir al-Din Shah in 1896 by a disgruntled intellectual further highlighted the growing unrest. His successor, Muzaffar al-Din Shah, reigned from 1896 to 1907, though generally more lenient, faced mounting pressure for reform. The culmination of this discontent was the Constitutional Revolution of 1905 to 1911, a pivotal moment in Persian history. This revolution, fueled by popular protests, strikes, and the demand for a representative government forced Muzaffar al-Din Shah to sign a decree establishing a constitution and a national assembly, Majlis, in 1906, just days before his death. This marked a significant, albeit temporary, shift from absolute monarchy to a constitutional one. The Majlis immediately set about drafting a more comprehensive constitution and a Bill of Rights. However, the path to constitutionalism was fraught with challenges. Muhammad Ali Shah reigned from 1907 to 1909. Muzaffar al-Din Shah's successor attempted to reverse the constitutional reforms, even bombarding the Majlis building with Russian support in 1908. This led to a civil war, with constitutionalist forces eventually triumphing and deposing Muhammad Ali Shah. Yet the revolution ultimately failed to establish a truly stable and independent constitutional government. Foreign intervention, particularly from Russia and Britain, who saw the political instability as an opportunity to further their own interests, played a significant role in undermining the nascent democratic institutions. The Anglo-Russian Convention of 1907, which divided Persia into spheres of influence without Persian consent, epitomized the extent of foreign encroachment and disregard for Persian sovereignty. By the outbreak of World War I, Persia, though officially neutral, found itself a battleground for the warring empires. Ottoman, Russian, and British forces all operated on Persian soil, causing immense suffering, famine, and further destabilization. The Qajar government, weak and bankrupt, was largely powerless to assert its authority. The post-war period saw continued foreign interference and a series of weak and ineffective shahs. The central government's authority had all but collapsed in many regions, with local warlords and tribal leaders asserting their independence. The stage was set for another powerful figure to emerge from the chaos, one who would once again seek to centralize power and assert Persian independence, albeit under a new dynastic banner. The Qajar dynasty, having presided over a century of decline and increasing foreign domination, was nearing its end, its once grand palaces now echoing with the murmurs of a fading era, waiting for the arrival of a new dawn, or perhaps another long twilight. The whispers of change that had begun to stir in the late Qajar era grew into a roaring gale, sweeping through the ancient land of Persia. The echoes of European Enlightenment, the burgeoning ideas of democracy, and the stark contrast between Persia's struggling autonomy and the encroaching imperial powers fueled a profound dissatisfaction. The Qajar Shahs, often seen as weak and indulgent, had granted concessions to foreign powers, mortgaging Persia's future piece by piece. This perceived betrayal, coupled with economic hardship and a growing intellectual class, ignited the spark of revolution. It was in the early years of the 20th century, specifically between 1905 and 1911, that this discontent crystallized into the constitutional revolution. The catalyst was often a series of seemingly minor events: a harsh government crackdown on merchants protesting high tariffs, the beating of a respected cleric, or the arbitrary actions of unpopular officials. But beneath these surface disturbances lay a deep-seated desire for justice and a more representative government. Merchants, ulama, religious scholars, intellectuals, and even some members of the aristocracy united in their demand for a majlis, a national assembly, and a written constitution to limit the Shah's absolute power. One of the most pivotal moments occurred in December 1905, when thousands of people, including many influential merchants and clerics, took sanctuary in the Shah Abdulazim shrine outside Tehran, a traditional form of protest known as Bast. They refused to leave until their demands were met. The Shah, Muzaffar al-Din Shah, initially resisted, but the widespread nature of the protests, coupled with the threat of further unrest, forced his hand. In August 1906, he reluctantly signed a decree promising a constitution and an elected parliament. This marked a monumental shift, theoretically transforming Persia from an absolute monarchy into a constitutional one. The first Majlis convened shortly thereafter, and a year later, in 1907, the Persian constitution was formally ratified, establishing a framework for a parliamentary system, defining citizens' rights, and creating the separation of powers. However, the path to constitutionalism was far from smooth. Mozaffar al-Din Shah died just days after signing the constitution, and his successor, Muhammad Ali Shah, was deeply hostile to the new order. He believed in the divine right of kings and saw the Majlis as an affront to his authority. This led to a bitter struggle between the constitutionalists and the royalists. In 1908, with the backing of the Russian Cossack Brigade, Muhammad Ali Shah launched a coup, bombarding the Majlis building in Tehran and dissolving the parliament. Many constitutionalists were arrested, exiled, or executed. For a brief period, it seemed as though the revolution had been crushed. Yet the spirit of constitutionalism had taken root. Resistance movements, particularly in Tabriz, Rasht, and Isfahan, continued the fight. The city of Tabriz, in particular, became a bastion of constitutionalist defiance, enduring a brutal siege by royalist forces. The bravery and tenacity of its defenders, led by figures like Sattar Khan and Bakr Khan, became legendary. Eventually, constitutionalist forces from various regions marched on Tehran, forcing Muhammad Ali Shah to abdicate in 1909. His young son, Ahmad Shah, was placed on the throne, and the constitution was reinstated. The second phase of the revolution, though successful in restoring the constitution, was plagued by internal divisions, foreign interference, and a lack of strong central authority. Both Britain and Russia, deeply suspicious of a strong independent Persia, actively sought to undermine the constitutional government, fearing it might threaten their spheres of influence. The presence of foreign troops, the economic pressures, and the internal strife ultimately led to the Majlis being dissolved once more in 1911, effectively ending the most active phase of the revolution. While the constitution remained nominally in place, the Qajar dynasty limped on, increasingly powerless and ineffective, particularly as the world plunged into the chaos of World War I. Persia, though officially neutral, became a battleground for the warring empires, further destabilizing its fragile political landscape. The legacy of the constitutional revolution is complex. It did not immediately usher in an era of democracy or stability. Indeed, historians still debate whether the revolution's ultimate failure to establish a robust democratic system was due to inherent weaknesses in Persian society, the overwhelming pressure from foreign powers, or the lack of a unified leadership with a clear vision for the future. However, it irrevocably changed the political consciousness of the nation. The idea of a limited monarchy, of a government accountable to its people, and of a written constitution became ingrained in the national psyche. It planted the seeds for future political movements and laid the groundwork for a more modern conception of the Persian state. As the Qajar dynasty faded into irrelevance, a new force emerged from the ashes of the old order. The instability following World War I, coupled with British concerns about Russian influence and the rise of Bolshevism, created a power vacuum. It was into this vacuum that Reza Khan, an ambitious and disciplined officer of the Persian Cossack Brigade, stepped forward. In 1921, he led a bloodless coup, seizing control of Tehran. Initially, he served as Minister of War, then as prime minister, consolidating his power with ruthless efficiency. He modernized the army, suppressed tribal revolts, and brought a semblance of order to a fractured nation. By 1925, the Majlis, recognizing the Qajar dynasty's utter inability to govern, formally deposed Ahmad Shah Qajar, who was living in exile. The stage was set for Reza Khan to assume the mantle of leadership. After much deliberation, and perhaps a calculated show of reluctance, he was crowned Shah of Persia, founding the Pahlavi dynasty. He chose the name Pahlavi to evoke the pre-Islamic Sasanian Empire, symbolizing a return to Persia's glorious ancient past and a break from the perceived decline of the Islamic era. Reza Shah Pahlavi embarked on an ambitious and sweeping program of modernization and nation-building, often referred to as the Pahlavi Modernization. His vision was to transform Persia into a strong, independent, and modern nation-state, largely modeled on Western European lines. He believed that Persia's weakness stemmed from its traditional structures, its economic underdevelopment, and its vulnerability to foreign interference. His reforms touched almost every aspect of society. Economically, he sought to reduce foreign economic dominance and build a self-sufficient industrial base. He established the National Bank of Iran, introduced a new currency, and invested heavily in infrastructure. The Trans-Iranian Railway, a monumental engineering feat connecting the Caspian Sea to the Persian Gulf, was perhaps his most iconic achievement, built entirely with domestic capital and without foreign loans. This railway not only facilitated trade and troop movements, but also became a powerful symbol of national pride and independence. He also encouraged the growth of modern industries, from textiles to sugar refineries, and sought to develop Persia's oil resources, though the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, later BP, still held significant sway. Socially and culturally, Reza Shah pursued a policy of secularization and westernization. He introduced a new civil code, largely based on French law, replacing traditional Islamic law in many areas. He established a modern education system, founding the University of Tehran in 1934, the first modern university in Persia, and sending thousands of students abroad for higher education. He also took steps to emancipate women, encouraging them to remove the veil, chador, and participate in public life. In 1936, he issued a decree banning the chador, a controversial measure that alienated many traditionalists, but was seen by others as a crucial step towards gender equality. He also sought to foster a strong sense of Iranian national identity, emphasizing the pre-Islamic heritage of Persia and promoting the Persian language. In 1935, he officially requested that foreign countries refer to his nation as Iran rather than Persia, a subtle but significant shift reflecting this nationalist agenda. Politically, Reza Shah was an autocrat. While the constitution remained nominally in place, the Majlis became a rubber stamp for his decrees. Political parties were suppressed, dissent was not tolerated, and his rule was characterized by a strong, centralized state with a powerful military and secret police. He consolidated power by weakening tribal leaders and the religious establishment, who had historically been powerful checks on royal authority. He saw these traditional power centers as obstacles to his modernization agenda and national unity. One lesser-known detail about Reza Shah's reign is his fascination with aviation. He was among the first world leaders to recognize the strategic importance of air power. He personally oversaw the establishment of the Imperial Iranian Air Force in the early 1920s, acquiring modern aircraft and training pilots, often sending them to Europe for advanced instruction. He even had a personal airfield built near his palace, and stories abound of him taking an active interest in the mechanics and capabilities of these new flying machines, seeing them as symbols of Persia's leap into modernity. However, his autocratic methods, while bringing stability and progress, also sowed the seeds of future discontent. His suppression of political freedoms, his heavy-handed approach to secularization, and his perceived neglect of the plight of the common people created underlying tensions. His efforts to balance between the great powers, particularly Britain and Germany, became increasingly difficult as World War II loomed. Despite declaring neutrality, Iran's strategic location and its oil resources made it a crucial prize. His perceived pro-German leanings, or at least his refusal to fully align with the Allies, ultimately led to his downfall. In 1941, Britain and the Soviet Union, fearing German influence and needing a supply route to the Soviet Union, jointly invaded Iran. Reza Shah was forced to abdicate in favor of his young son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, and went into exile, dying a few years later. The Pahlavi era, particularly under Reza Shah, was a period of dramatic transformation. It was a time when ancient Persia grappled with the demands of the modern world, striving to catch up with the West while simultaneously asserting its unique identity. His legacy remains a subject of intense debate. Was he a benevolent modernizer who saved Iran from fragmentation and foreign domination? Or a ruthless dictator who stifled democracy and alienated vast segments of the population? Perhaps both. His reign laid the foundations for a modern nation-state, but the autocratic nature of his rule and that of his successor ultimately contributed to the revolutionary forces that would erupt decades later. The ambition to modernize, to build a strong and independent Iran, was undeniable, but the means employed often came at a significant cost to political freedom and social cohesion. The echoes of his grand projects, like the railway snaking through mountains and deserts, still whisper tales of a nation striving to find its place in a rapidly changing world. A world where the ancient land of Persia was determined to carve out a new destiny. The scent of oil, once a promise of boundless modernity, now mingled with the acrid smell of discontent in the streets of Iran. By the late 1970s, the Shah's vision of a westernized, technologically advanced nation, while bringing undeniable progress in some sectors, had also sown deep divisions. His rapid reforms, often perceived as imposed from above and eroding traditional values, alienated significant segments of the population. The gap between the opulent lifestyles of the elite and the struggles of the working class widened, fueling resentment. Political repression, through the Savak secret police, stifled dissent, pushing opposition movements underground, where they often found sanctuary and solidarity within religious institutions. The year 1978 began with sporadic protests, small tremors that hinted at a coming earthquake. Students, intellectuals, and merchants, disillusioned by economic stagnation, political authoritarianism, and cultural alienation, began to voice their grievances more openly. These disparate groups, however, lacked a unified leadership until the emergence of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. Exiled for over a decade, first to Turkey, then to Iraq, and finally to France, Khomeini's message, disseminated through cassette tapes and clandestine networks, resonated deeply. He condemned the Shah's government as corrupt and un-Islamic, advocating for an Islamic government based on the principles of clerical rule. His charisma and unwavering conviction transformed the fragmented opposition into a powerful, religiously motivated movement. The protests escalated throughout 1978. Black Friday, on September 8th, marked a brutal turning point when security forces fired upon demonstrators in Tehran's Jaleh Square, killing hundreds. This event shattered any remaining illusions of a peaceful resolution and galvanized the opposition. Strikes crippled the economy, and millions poured into the streets, demanding the Shah's departure. Faced with overwhelming popular unrest and the unraveling of his military's loyalty, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, the last monarch of Persia, left Iran on January 16, 1979, ostensibly for a vacation. His departure, however, signaled the end of 2,500 years of continuous monarchy in Persia. Just 2 weeks later, on February 1st, Ayatollah Khomeini returned to a rapturous welcome in Tehran. His arrival solidified the revolution's direction, moving beyond mere anti-Shah sentiment to the establishment of an Islamic republic. The provisional government, led by Prime Minister Mehdi Bazargan, struggled to assert control amidst the revolutionary fervor. Revolutionary committees, or comités, emerged as powerful local organs, often acting independently of the central government. The old order swiftly collapsed, its institutions dismantled, and its symbols erased. On April 1, 1979, following a national referendum, Iran officially became an Islamic republic. This marked a profound societal transformation, shifting the nation's legal, political, and social framework to align with Islamic principles. The new constitution, approved later that year, established the concept of velayat-e faqih, or guardianship of the jurist, granting supreme authority to the supreme leader, a position first held by Ayatollah Khomeini. This unique blend of republicanism and theological governance set Iran on a distinct path, diverging sharply from its monarchical past and Western models of democracy. The early years of the Islamic Republic were turbulent, marked by internal consolidation and external threats. The new government faced challenges from various political factions, including secularists, leftists, and ethnic minorities, all of whom had contributed to the revolution but held different visions for Iran's future. Many of these groups were suppressed, leading to a period of internal purges and executions. The seizure of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran in November 1979 by radical students, holding 52 American diplomats hostage for 444 days, further isolated Iran internationally and solidified a posture of defiance against perceived Western interference. The most devastating challenge, however, came from neighboring Iraq. In September 1980, Saddam Hussein, fearing the spread of revolutionary fervor to Iraq's Shia majority and seeking to exploit Iran's post-revolutionary disarray, launched a full-scale invasion. The Iran-Iraq War, lasting 8 brutal years, became one of the 20th century's longest and deadliest conventional conflicts. It claimed an estimated 500,000 to 1 million lives on both sides and inflicted immense economic damage. The war, often fought with trench warfare reminiscent of World War I, saw the use of chemical weapons by Iraq and contributed to a deep sense of national sacrifice and resilience in Iran. Despite its immense cost, the war also served to unify the revolutionary government, allowing it to consolidate power and suppress internal opposition under the banner of national defense. After the war's end in 1988, Iran embarked on a period of reconstruction and gradual normalization, though the revolutionary ideals remained foundational. The death of Ayatollah Khomeini in June 1989 led to the succession of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei as supreme leader. A transition that demonstrated the institutionalization of the new political system. The presidency, held by figures like Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani and Muhammad Khatami, saw periods of economic liberalization and attempts at rapprochement with the international community, though these efforts were often constrained by the overarching authority of the supreme leader and conservative factions. One lesser-known detail about this period is the significant role of the Basij paramilitary force, formed during the revolution. Initially a loose organization of volunteers, it evolved into a powerful, pervasive force involved in everything from maintaining internal security and enforcing social norms to providing social services and mobilizing support for the government. Its deep roots within society and its ideological commitment have made it a persistent and influential element of the Islamic Republic's power structure. The complexities of modern Iran continue to be a subject of scholarly debate. Historians still disagree whether the Islamic Revolution was primarily a religious uprising, a broad-based social revolution against authoritarianism, or a unique confluence of both, shaped by specific historical circumstances and the charismatic leadership of Khomeini. Some scholars emphasize the economic grievances and political repression as primary drivers, while others argue that the deep cultural and religious roots of Iranian society made an Islamic ideological framework inevitable once the monarchy faltered. This ongoing discussion highlights the multifaceted nature of the revolution and its profound impact. In the decades that followed, Iran navigated a complex geopolitical landscape. Its nuclear program, initiated under the Shah but continued and expanded by the Islamic Republic, became a central point of contention with Western powers, leading to international sanctions. Despite these challenges, Iran has made significant advancements in science, technology, and medicine, and its cultural influence, particularly in cinema and arts, has continued to flourish globally. The nation remains a unique entity. Shaped by its ancient Persian heritage, its deep Islamic faith, and the transformative experience of its 1979 revolution, all contributing to its distinct place in the contemporary world.